Hey guys, welcome back. Miss Womack, Mr.
We're
Shaw,
back.
getting to it. First day of break. I feel like this is just a really good way for us to get started.
Yeah, first day of Thanksgiving break, and we're doing videos.
Let me say you're welcome.
Thank you.
All right, let's get to it. So we're going to get into Chapter 15. We're going to start, and this one's just going to cover the first three sections. So in the first one, we're going to identify the basic elements of the American judicial system and the major participants in it. Let's get to it.
Okay, so here's your vocab page. I don't feel like, do we need to talk about any of these to explain them at all?
I think
I mean, just read them yourself.
we'll talk about them when it comes up in the
actual
part.
slides, yeah.
All right. So, nature of the judicial system. There's two types. Again, what we are known to have what's known. Let me start over. We have an adversarial system, which Ms. Womack and I just learned means that it's people who are like going against each other. So it's like one person versus one person, or like a group versus a group in a court. So there's two types of courts, court cases. First one is going to be in criminal law. That's when you are violating a specific law or laws, and the offense that it takes place may harm an individual or a society as a whole. So this is talking about like burglary or murder. I don't know why I always go to that one. And then the possible punishments in criminal law are going to be imprisonment, fines, or community service. Civil law, though, is going to be a dispute between two parties, specifically private parties, usually about like contracts, property, divorce, child custody, etc. So like, say Miss Womack and I were neighbors and her tree fell into my yard because she never takes care of her yard. I don't know. I have no idea.
I pay somebody to do that.
Sorry. Anyway, and then so I can sue her for damages to my property. That would be a civil case. No law was broken, but we are in a dispute.
Yeah, we have to settle the dispute.
And then again, the possible punishments are going to be fines.
Yep. Ugh. All right, so participants in the judicial system. We have something that is called litigants, and it's literally just the people involved.
Well, it's like the people who are appealing to the courts.
Okay, so they are the ones who are saying, hello, something has happened to me, and I need it fixed. Okay, so the courts can only hear actual disputes. So what no hypothetical cases means is they can't just decide on a case that hasn't actually been brought to them, an issue that hasn't actually been brought to them.
What would happen if...
Yeah, right. Like,
anyway. You can't do that.
No hypotheticals. Standing to sue means that you are the actual person that it happened to. I can't have seen something happen and say, an injustice happened and I'm bringing it to court. I have to actually be the person involved in the situation to actually have a court case around it. Class action suits are when a group of people get together and sue on maybe a larger group's behalf. So an example of this would have been in Brown versus the Board of Education. Linda Brown was the name on the case, but she was actually just representing a much larger group of people in the school desegregation situation.
Real quick, I actually was invited to be a part of a class action suit against 54th Street. Miss Womack doesn't know this.
Bar and grill.
I know. It's actually grill and bar.
Grill and bar. It's a grill.
Because we
it's
put
a grill,
the food
not
first.
A bar. Okay. Continue.
Anyway, so basically 54th Street was like people who worked there were accusing 54th Street of underpaying us because they would make the servers do a bunch of extra work after they weren't taking tables anymore. And so servers only make half of minimum wage. And what they were saying was that they should have, and even bussers actually only made half of minimum wage.
If
even
you're
though
not
they
getting
were only
tips, you should be at least making minimum wage.
Exactly. So anyway, there's a bunch of people. I was invited to do it, but it seemed like a lot of work. So I was like, I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm happy with 54th Street. I met my wife there, so stop it. Sorry,
okay,
continue.
Sorry, off track. So then I go to justiciable disputes, and this is just the court saying, sure, this case we can decide on this case. So there is a legal matter involved, and we will be able to decide or put down a dispute in this case. Okay. Next.
Great example was Baker v. Carr that you guys learned about. Again, talking about the one man, one vote.
With the gerrymandering situation.
Yes. And so they decided that, like, the court in Baker v. Carr decided that they could hear this case, and they decided that every district has to have roughly the same amount of people. Sorry,
thank
continue.
you. No, thank you for the example. Okay. So moving on to attorneys. We know that attorneys is a very popular profession, being a lawyer in the United States. There are about 1 million across the country. And your book points out that it used to be that hiring an attorney was for people who had a lot of money and who could afford it. But now we, as part of our Constitution, a part of our amendments, our rights, every person deserves to have a lawyer and has the right to have a lawyer regardless of how much money they have. So if you cannot afford a lawyer, one is appointed to you.
Perfect.
And then amicus curiae briefs are going to be something where it's like, let's say there's a court case happening and there's an outside group that just wants to kind of get a point across to help out the court. So they're going to issue an amicus curiae brief, which will give the court a little bit more information, maybe on a case that happened prior to, or maybe it's the NAACP saying, here's just more information and more facts that might help you when deciding on your case.
Okay, so like, for example, if there was a court case involving like an unregistered weapon, like an unregistered gun, and a guy who had used that gun to assault a number of people, the NRA might actually provide an amicus curiae brief to the judges for that case, just saying, hey, here's what you need to know.
Right.
Okay? Whereas also on the flip side of that, whoever, I can't think of an interest group against the NRA, like, I don't know, maybe drunk driving was involved too, and Mothers Against Drunk Driving would also submit an amicus curiae brief that is giving them the other side.
Yeah.
So they don't have a part to play,
no,
but they want to get their point across. They have an interest in how the case turns out.
Yes.
So they submit a brief to the court just to make sure that they know that.
Perfect.
All right, so
already to point 2.
Look at that.
Wow.
We're flying here on this Wednesday morning.
Wednesday morning.
Unbelievable. All right, 15.2, outline the structure of the federal court system and the major responsibilities of each component. You're unbelievable.
Okay, I want to stop here for just a second. So there are vocab terms, and we usually don't go over them, but I want to make sure we know the difference between original and appellate.
Sure.
Should we just wait until the next slide?
No, let's do it.
Okay. So in our court system, we have 2 types of what we call jurisdiction. And jurisdiction itself is just the authority of a court to hear a case.
You should probably write that down.
Yes. So jurisdiction is just the authority of a court to hear a case. Okay. But we're going to talk about original jurisdiction and appellate. Okay, so original jurisdiction is when a court can hear a case first. So all of our lower level courts, so when we get into, we're going to talk about the district courts at the federal level, they all have original jurisdiction, so they can hear a case first. Okay, then appellate jurisdiction is the authority to hear a case on appeals. So for example, the appeals court, it's the second step in the federal court system. They only have appellate jurisdiction. They will never hear a case first. They will only hear a case on appeal, which we say they have appellate jurisdiction. And we'll get a little bit more into that as we get through the slides. But we definitely need to make sure we know the difference between the 2 of those, because those are very important vocabulary terms.
Seems good. Let's get into it.
Okay.
All right. I would definitely copy down this chart, especially like this. Like, unfortunately, this main part here, like, that I'm circling, like, that you see in these boxes on the left side.
That's the main chunk.
That's the main chunk that we're worried about. That we'll talk about every part of it, but that's the main thing that happens. So, again, if a federal crime is committed, okay, or like in this case, there could be a problem between a state or somebody, well, I guess that would go straight to the Supreme Court. Anyway, let's just start at district court.
But you have to remember that there's a difference between federal courts and state courts. Each state has their own court system. Like Missouri has their own Missouri court system, but there's also a federal court system, and only federal crimes or cases will be heard in the federal system.
So a federal crime has to be broken, or there could be an issue of constitutionality.
Right.
If there is if for example, there's with Donald Trump's immigration ban, there was a lot of district judges that were issuing restrictions to that and kind of declaring that unconstitutional because they thought that it violated the Constitution.
Right, the actual Constitution.
Correct. So anyway, the main thing that's going to happen that we're worried about is that you're going to start here at your district courts. There's 91 of those. They're all over the country. Okay. Then if you lose, say you broke a federal crime, okay, you lose your case. Now you can appeal to one of the 12 circuit courts of appeal. Okay, we have a map of that later, and then after that, if you lose the appeal, you can then appeal to the Supreme Court. It's very unlikely that the Supreme Court is going to hear your case, though. They get something crazy, like 8,000 or 80,000.
Yeah, and they only hear about 80 cases.
Yes.
It's like 10% of the cases that are brought to them, they actually decide to hear.
Correct. So that's the main pathway that people take. Do we want to talk about the independent regulatory? Let's just mention it briefly.
Sure,
So
yeah.
With independent regulatory commission, so for example, the FDA, just now, in the news, romaine lettuce is nowhere to be found because apparently
it has E. coli.
Yeah, no one's cleaning it right.
Yeah, don't eat it.
So anyway.
Okay, wait, really quick. I had McAllister's last night.
Oh no.
And they were like, "Oh, we can't put the romaine lettuce on the sandwich, so we'll just have to do iceberg." And I was like, "Cool, yeah, I don't want to get E. coli." I'm just saying, it's an example of the lettuce situation. Continue.
Well, while we're on examples, I'm just kidding. Sorry. So they basically the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, can slap a fine on the people who are in charge of
cleaning the lettuce.
Okay, whatever.
We don't know what company
whatever
that is.
company it is.
This is hypothetical.
Okay? And then that company could appeal their fine to a federal court of appeals here. Okay.
Right.
So that's an example. We're not really worried about you.
Yeah, I mean, that's not that important.
On the other side, we have these over here. We have legislative courts and courts of military appeals. A legislative court is something super specific, like a tax court or a bankruptcy court. Okay, and then what's going to happen there is for example, if you declared bankruptcy, you would have to go to one of these legislative courts here, and if you didn't like the decision, you could appeal it to the courts of appeal for the federal circuit. Again, it's really confusing. This is the 13th district, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. So then again, you take the same route. But again, there's also, if there's an issue of constitutionality, okay, that might go directly to the Supreme Court. Not a big deal, we don't think, but just we wanted to make sure you guys understood all of this.
Yeah. So we're going to focus more on the boxes that have the thick black outline, the constitutional courts. So we're not really going to touch on the legislative or the independent stuff. We're really more worried about you guys understanding the constitutional courts. All right. So the federal system has a specific structure. Okay. So you can kind of look at it as almost like a pyramid. So if you start at the bottom of the pyramid where it's the biggest, you're going to have the district courts, and there are district courts all over the country. There's at least one in each state. Oh, good. Okay. So there's 91 again, and there's at least one in each state. In Missouri, we have 2. There's one in Kansas City and there's one in St. Louis. And so there are between 2 and 28 judges per district court, and there's 678 judges total. And the president appoints all of those judges. Okay, so that's part of his appointment power, is getting the district courts filled with judges as well. And these district courts, again, have original jurisdiction where they have the power to hear a case first. So then federal magistrate judges, they're almost like assistant district judges. They are appointed to 8-year terms, and they're actually given their positions. District judges in a certain district will majority vote to appoint these magistrate judges. And what they do is they just kind of help out with the workload for the district judges, because at the district level, they hear the most cases, right? So their job is basically to filter through all these cases. And so the workload gets to be a lot, and these federal magistrate judges will help out with that.
So they'll like set bail. They're like when the first time a defendant comes in, they'll like hear like the initial like arguments, like probably like the not guilty pleas or whatever,
Right.
and then they'll set the bail, and then after that the regular federal district judge will take over. All right, so the jurisdiction of district courts, there's a ton of stuff here, and I would probably be familiar with a lot of it. Like we mentioned, there's federal crimes, civil suits under federal law. So if if a federal law is causing a dispute between two private parties, the district courts are going to handle that. Civil suits between citizens of different states. The federal court would take that because they don't want a state court to hear that, because a state court might favor the person or the party from their state. They also supervise bankruptcy proceedings. There's actually a bankruptcy court right here in St. Louis. And they review actions of some federal administrative agencies. So, for example, like the FDA, like we mentioned earlier. Admiralty and maritime law cases. Like,
what's admiralty?
I think it just has to do with ships.
And maritime is just on water.
Oh, okay. So admiralty is probably the people who are in charge of those ships, I would assume.
Probably.
Okay, we're learning.
Like an admiral?
Seems right.
Yeah.
I like it. And then also they're going to supervise the naturalization of aliens.
Oh, like UFOs?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my wife, for example, she was naturalized and became a U.S. citizen, and there was a federal district judge who actually naturalized her along with a group of other 100 other citizens.
Did she have to swear in?
Yep, had to swear in.
Cool.
For her
cool.
oath of allegiance.
Ugh.
Sorry, that was really creepy. I apologize. Okay, anything to add for the jurisdiction?
Not really.
I think we got it all.
Okay. All right, courts of appeals. Moving on. So we're on the second tier of that pyramid that I kind of talked about. So we're moving up. There are less in the appeals court, so it's kind of the middle chunk of the pyramid. So their job is to literally just review the district court's decision. They do not hear the case. They do not hear arguments. They do not see evidence. They don't do any of that. They literally, if a case is appealed to them, they literally review the proceedings and make sure that the lower court proceeded legally and made lawful decisions, constitutional decisions. And so they're going to review and say, well, maybe something was done wrong by the previous judge, and then they'll make a decision from there. Most of the 53,000 cases from the district courts get appealed.
No, so of the 53,000 cases that courts of appeals get, most of them come
from the district courts. Okay, that's that. I got it. I don't know what IRC orders are.
Independent regulatory
commissions. Yes, good. Okay. And then there's 12 circuits, and there's at least 2 states per circuit. So I know that a federal appeals court for our particular circuit is in St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then there's also a 13th circuit in Puerto Rico.
Yes.
Yeah, and then there's one for the Virgin Islands.
Oh.
And then there's one for Guam as well. So our territories.
It's an appeals court?
Yeah.
Cool. I think, wow.
Yeah, right here. Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands. Oh, they're not separate. Do I need to?
It's okay.
So Puerto Rico is part of the First Circuit. Virgin Islands is part of the Third Circuit. And Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands are in the Ninth Circuit.
Look at that.
Huh.
Real quick, I think I misspoke earlier when I was talking about district courts, talking about the jurisdiction. I had said, where was it? Review of actions of some federal administrative agencies, and I had mentioned the FDA thing. We had talked about that as going straight to appeals courts. So I think this is separate. So, for example, if somebody in the federal government had done something, and they had. And it was unconstitutional, a district level judge could declare it unconstitutional. They'll review what was going on. Again, similar to the immigration ban, I think. So that's closer to what we were talking about. I had mentioned the FDA, but the FDA example that we gave would fall more closely under here.
Yeah.
The Review Independent Regulatory Agency Commission rulings. My bad.
Okay, that's okay. Let's keep going.
Okay.
All right. So in the courts of appeals, there are about 6 to 28 judges per court, 179 total. And it's important to know that at the appeals level, most of the time, it's going to be a 3-judge panel that is making a decision. It's not just one, it's usually 3. But in some cases, lawyers can request an en banc.
En banc. And
that would be if all of the judges in that particular appeals court hear the case. So sometimes the 3-judge panel will hear a case and the defendant maybe doesn't like the decision. They can actually request en banc to get all, I think it's 9 judges to hear that same situation and make a decision on it.
Well, and the other thing too is that if the case is really important, all of the judges might want to hear the case, and they might just all want to participate.
Okay, and again, they only decide on errors of procedure and law. They do not hear the testimonies, and they don't see the evidence. They just decide on errors, and that we say will set precedent. So setting precedent would be like whatever they decide on that particular case, other judges behind them, if they hear cases on the same kind of situation or topic, they might use this particular case as like a jumping off point to decide on that case that they currently have in front of them.
Perfect. Breaking this down just a little bit, the district courts are going to be your traditional like trial courts that you see on TV.
Good.
Okay, like you guys are going to say like Law and Order, like I'm sure you guys have seen it at some point in time. That's district courts.
Yes.
Okay, courts of appeals don't look anything at all like that. It's at most are usually 3 justices, and it's just the lawyers in the case.
The lawyers have like 30 minutes,
Right.
like very short time to break down the case and their side of the situation, and then the judges will decide. Right.
And it's like, as it says here in the 3rd bullet, errors of procedure and law, they are dealing specifically, like the lawyers are trying to say, hey, this is the error that our previous judge made.
Right.
And this is why you should overturn that decision.
Correct.
Or on the other side, this no one made a mistake, and this is why you should uphold that decision.
Yeah.
So these are the circuits. Again, there are the 12 circuits that you see. Again, you see Missouri is in the eighth circuit, and again it's kind of difficult because you notice that like California that has a lot of people, like they're in the 9th circuit. They cover a ton of states, but like these other areas, they don't have a whole lot. There's not a huge population in like Idaho.
I think that's
Montana.
weird, but like California, you would think they would have like their own circuit.
Exactly. But that's the thing is that they can have more courts like that are a part of the circuit,
right?
But it's just they consider that just one circuit.
Correct.
So again, it's kind of confusing. Where I don't think you'll necessarily need to know what the different circuits are. We just kind of wanted to show you these are the appeals courts here.
Right.
Okay. So like in St. Louis, we have an appeals court for the 8th Circuit.
Yeah, so if someone in Arkansas appeals their federal district court decision, the case would be the judges in St. Louis. The appeals court in St. Louis is the one that's going to decide on that case.
Which we will be hearing an appeals process at Fort Zumwalt South in April. Okay?
Woohoo!
Woohoo! You're welcome. Oh, please love us. Okay, so then we have the Supreme Court. Again, the Supreme Court has really unique responsibilities. It's the only court that's actually mentioned in the Constitution. The Constitution also mentions that that Congress has the ability to establish all of the lower courts, which they did with the Federal Judiciary Act of, I think, 1789. And they established the district and the appeals courts. Anyway, so the Supreme Court's responsibilities are resolving conflicts among states, maintaining national supremacy in law, again, upholding the Constitution at all times, and then ensuring uniformity in interpretation. Yes. So if two different judges at the lower levels are interpreting things differently, the Supreme Court is more likely to take that case so they can solve the issue.
Very good.
The composition is going to be, right now anyway, 8 associate justices and 1 chief justice. Again, we say justices only for the Supreme Court. That number has fluctuated for a lot of times, like during Andrew Jackson's presidency, two of them died, and so the Congress just didn't want them to replace them, so they just voted to lower it to 7.
Yeah, that's
Isn't that
weird.
Yeah, that was like a bunch of jerks.
Yeah.
Anyway, the Supreme Court is also very unique in that it controls its docket. The docket is literally the list of cases that the Supreme Court hears.
It's like a calendar.
Exactly.
And they put in a case on whatever day.
You know what? I'm going to start calling my calendar a docket.
Docket.
Docket down. I'll work on it. All right. Anyway, they hear about 80 cases a year, so it's a very low number. But again, they're only going to hear the most important cases that come up in that year. And the appeals must involve a substantial federal question.
Right. So like Brown versus the board.
Correct.
The federal question would have been, are the 14th Amendment rights of these children being violated under the Equal Protections Clause by making them go to a separate school?
Perfect. They do actually have some original jurisdiction in cases involving like like international, what are they called?
Like
ambassadors, yes.
Yeah.
They will usually hear those, although those cases don't happen very often.
No.
They usually just send the person back to their country.
Right.
Also, cases involving pirates.
Yeah, pirates.
Things on again, and that's really a random thing, I know, but
pirates were a thing in the 1700s.
So they are gonna have some original jurisdiction, but most of the cases they hear are going to be appealed to them. But again, they get to choose, so I guess it doesn't really matter. Okay. So these are the ways that a case can reach a Supreme Court. Would you have them write this down, Mr. Womack?
I probably would. Yes.
Wouldn't be a bad idea.
Yeah.
So the original jurisdiction, again, as I just mentioned, cases involving foreign diplomats.
This is a good chart.
You know, it really is.
It is.
Also, cases involving a state between the United States and a state, so like a conflict, conflicts between 2 or more states, or between one state and citizens of another state, or between a state and a foreign country, although that probably wouldn't happen very often.
Yeah, that's weird, right?
I don't know.
Like, why would France sue Missouri?
I don't know. Maybe they're mad that we called them St. Louis. St.
Louis.
Louis.
Okay, there you go. Louis the 14th.
There you go.
16th?
I don't know. Whoops.
Sorry.
We haven't taught world in a while.
Yeah.
All right. So the appellate. I just like to say appellate to annoy you.
Appellate.
The appellate jurisdiction is going to be, again, coming from the U.S. Court of Appeals, the Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit, the legislative courts, as we mentioned, and then the state courts of last resorts.
Which would be state Supreme Courts.
Correct. So it's very rare for a state case to go to the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court is a federal court. It doesn't really deal with a lot of state issues. However, if the state is violating their, like a citizen's rights, like a fundamental rights from the Bill of Rights, then the Supreme Court will get involved.
Yeah.
But not usually. But it can.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's good. Okay.
I wouldn't write this.
Yeah, maybe just look over it. So it's the sources of full opinions in the Supreme Court, 14 through 15. It's just giving you the type of case and how many cases the Supreme Court hears. So see how original jurisdiction at the very top, they only had one case in 2014-15 where they actually heard it first. I would like to see what that case was, but that's not an option, I suppose. Civil actions from lower federal courts, 55, criminal cases, etc. So it's just kind of breaking down. So you see total 74 cases. That's it. That's all they heard for the 14-15 year.
And again, most of them are going to be civil actions rather than criminal cases. But again, since they get to choose, it's I don't know. It can be really whatever they want to hear, whatever the judges. And we have 2 new justices right now, so like they're going to want to hear different cases. Like I think they all take a circuit, don't they?
They have.
Or they'll have like an area of the country that they deal with. So like,
I don't know.
I've heard that before. Like so, like for example, Brett Kavanaugh will take a certain area of the country, and he will, if a case comes up in that circuit or that area,
he'll propose it.
Correct. He'll propose it to the rest of the court.
But of the 9 justices, 4 have to agree to hear the case.
Correct. Which again, we can talk about more in class. It's called the writ of certiorari.
Certiorari.
Did I say it wrong?
Certiorari.
Certiorari?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Certiorari.
Anyway, you have to submit the writ of certiorari.
Right.
I think you're lying.
No, that's how you say it.
Anyway, you have to submit that to the court, and they have to approve it in order to actually hear your case.
Right.
All right. So let's go ahead.
50.3.
Almost done. This one's a lot shorter. Take it away.
Ugh. Senatorial courtesy. So it is a very long definition for basically, we know the president appoints federal judges. Okay. So if a senator from the state in which a federal judge is about to be appointed has a problem with that judge and voices that problem, then it is senatorial courtesy for the Senate to not approve that judge to be appointed in that court in that state.
Correct.
Okay.
So let's get into it.
Okay.
Get the definition down, and we'll kind of talk more about it. The main thing about senatorial courtesy is it applies to almost always just district courts.
Yeah.
Because the district courts are going to serve states, and so if a senator from that state, where say there's a vacancy in Missouri, and now starting January 3rd, Josh Hawley didn't like a certain judge that President Trump wanted to appoint. Then President Trump wouldn't even appoint that person, most likely now, because it's really embarrassing. You don't want that to happen because it makes you look really bad.
Right.
So what they'll do now is the president will literally will request a list from the senators of that state and try to find one that they like.
Right.
So they kind of avoid that embarrassment.
So the senator will say, here's a list of judges who I think would be good in the position, and then the president will pick from that list, knowing that their appointment will not be rejected.
Correct. And this really doesn't apply to the appeals courts or the Supreme Court, because the appeals court serves a multitude of states, at least two, and the Supreme Court serves the entire country.
Right.
So that, again, senatorial courtesy is interesting because it actually takes away a presidential power. In the Constitution, it gives the president the power to appoint judges, and but essentially now the senators are the ones from that state are the ones that are appointing those justices.
Yeah.
It's really weird.
Huh.
The Constitution.
Checks and balances?
Being overran.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Ugh.
So we talked about
jumped
senatorial
ahead here. Sorry.
We got excited. Take it away. You want to take one?
We talked about senatorial courtesy. The Department of Justice and the FBI conduct background checks on these federal judge appointees. They make sure they do a very, very thorough job. And we saw this and this is at the Supreme Court level, but we saw this recently with Brett Kavanaugh. The Senate Judiciary Committee really looks into the background of these judges and make sure that they are moral individuals, and that they look into the decisions that they've made in the past, and they look at their background in general and make sure that they are good to go on the federal court level.
There was a guy in the 80s that was appointed. His last name was Ginsburg. I don't remember his first name, but he had to withdraw his name because they found out that he smoked marijuana in college, and he
morally corrupt.
Right, and considering that marijuana was illegal, he just withdrew his name. He didn't even get heard in front of the Senate, or didn't get the hearing in front of the Senate, rather.
Right, and so then we get to the politics of judicial selection, and this is a very big situation. So federal judges are appointed for life. And so presidents having the ability to appoint these judges, they try to kind of lock in their legacy with who they appoint to these different courts. And so that makes it very political and very partisan, especially lately, I feel like. So presidents are going to, for example, President Trump has appointed 2 conservative judges to the Supreme Court, and they will serve for life as long as they continue good behavior. So as long as they don't do anything really bad to get removed from their position, because they can be impeached, they will be there until they decide to retire or they die. So that really locks down many, many years of decisions that these judges are going to make that kind of portray or lock in the legacy of President Trump.
And again, it's a way for them to kind of just extend like these conservative decisions that President Trump is making now. He wants that to continue long after he's out of office.
Right.
And we're talking specifically about the lower courts now, and that's why like Obama under his administration, he appointed all kinds of district judges that were liberal to these lower courts, and he actually lowered the requirements so that the Democrats, they took away the filibuster for everything but the Supreme Court, and that allowed them to just fly through and just appoint all of these liberal justices, or judges rather. But it came back to bite them once the Republicans took over the Senate, and then they have been doing the same thing ever since. And now they actually lowered the level. You had to get 2/3, but now you only have
simple majority.
Now it's just a simple majority, and that's changed a lot of the layout of what the Supreme Court and just the court system in general looks like.
Right. I think Obama, the thought process with the administration was, well, the district level courts hear the most cases. So if we get liberal judges in the district courts, we're going to have these decisions that are being made that are kind of siding with our politics. But then once Trump gets in, you can flip those seats. I mean, you can just keep appointing more conservative. And so we'll probably see that continue to happen as we go through the years and get different presidents.
The divide is definitely growing, and unfortunately, like until we figure out a way to work together, it's gonna keep happening. It's probably only gonna get worse.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because judges in the United States, they actually serve for life, and I'm talking about the federal judges. They do serve for life, and that is really rare, actually.
Yeah.
We're the only country that allows that. Out of all of these, you see all these other countries, these are the terms for their highest court. I wouldn't write this. This is just interesting. But again, like France, all the way to Spain, it's a 9-year non-renewable term. You see some of them in Germany, Japan, they must retire at 68 and 70.
Yeah, I mean, they force people to retire. That's kind of neat.
And you talk about, I think it's Hamilton that wrote the Federalist paper for this one. I'm not exactly sure, but he talks about how you want the Supreme Court to be separate. You want it to be completely separated from politics, from Congress, from even the president, because you want them to be able to do a good job. You want them to kind of make the decision based on just the law. But the good behavior for life thing, it seems like it might almost be a negative, or at least these other countries might think it's a negative.
For sure. But you got to think about when the founding fathers did put this in the Constitution, life is not 80 and 90 like it is now. It's 40 or 50, right? Probably.
So they said, we'll give you a good behavior for life, and that's only like 10 years.
Right. You get 10 years, and then you'll be dead. Also,
there are no constitutional requirements for
absolutely
being
not. And that's also kind of weird.
A court justice.
Literally, you don't have to have any law background. Now we trust the presidents to make good decisions when appointing these judges, and that's really all we have to go by.
It could be one of us. It could be one of you.
Yeah.
There you go. Something to look forward to.
Ugh. All right, Supreme Court. Vacancies are very infrequent. Usually, so in the last few years, in 2016, Antonin Scalia passed away, so they had to, that was when Obama was still president, but the Senate refused to hear his appointees. It was a whole hot mess. So he died. We see that, and that's Neil Gorsuch. Trump appointed Neil Gorsuch to fill that vacancy. This summer, Anthony Kennedy decided to retire, and that is where Brett Kavanaugh came in and filled his vacancy. So it's very infrequent that we actually see vacancies in the Supreme Court. A Chief Justice vacancy is very unique. I don't remember the procedure that goes into picking the Chief Justice.
So it's basically the same, but the main part about it is that you can. So when again, there's a Chief Justice and then 8 associate justices. So when that justice either retires or dies, they can choose one of the 8, or they can pick from a new set, like all of the anybody else from the that has served at the district level, or because since there's no requirements, it could be anybody.
Yeah.
So
they can bring in somebody new to be the
correct.
Chief Judge.
And that's what George W. Bush did when William Rehnquist, who was the previous Chief Justice, he stepped down, and then he appointed John Roberts Jr.,
Right.
who had not served on the Supreme Court yet, but he could have chosen somebody else
Right.
from the Supreme Court.
Okay, that makes sense. And then Mr. Shaw already said that senatorial courtesy is really not relevant at the Supreme Court level since they serve the entire country and not just one state. Partisan balance in Senate is key when it comes to appointing them.
You have to. I mean, you guys. The problem is that the president has to rely on the Senate,
Yeah.
and the balance in the Senate is absolutely key because, so for example, this didn't happen, but let's say that the Senate had flipped and become Democrat in these last midterm elections, then President Trump would almost have to appoint a moderate judge,
Yeah.
to the Supreme Court
to get that person approved because
Correct.
the Democrats are who's approving that person.
Exactly. So that's why it was so important for the Republicans to keep that Senate balance, or to keep that Senate majority, so that they could keep appointing conservative justices.
Right. And then we talked about recent nominations already, so I don't know if we really need to go over that again.
We're good.
Kavanaugh, Gorsuch.
Again, we've had a lot. Hey, Douglas Ginsburg. So
Douglas.
these are the recent the recent unsuccessful Supreme Court nominees since 1900, and again, Merrick Garland being the most recent one. And again, these are all for all kinds of reasons. But again, you'll see the A's. All the A's are when the nomination was withdrawn. Fortas. Where is he? Abe Fortas in 1968. He was serving on the court as an associate justice. Was nominated to be chief justice, but he was unsuccessful. And again, the Senate took no action on the nominations of Thornberry in 1968 or Merrick Garland in 2016. Again, and that's just because usually when the president's party is different from the Senate's party, they can really just be like, nope,
We're not going to even hear your person that you want to put up.
Sorry.
And that's what they did to Obama. So just really quickly, the Senate was majority Republican at this time in 2016, and Obama says, well, there's a vacancy. It's part of my job to fill that vacancy. But the Senate literally just said, we're not even going to hear your appointment. We're going to wait until the new president is sworn in, and that's exactly what they did. And then almost immediately, Trump was able to appoint Neil Gorsuch, a conservative judge.
They were banking on Trump winning the election,
Right.
Because had Hillary Clinton won, they would have had to have accepted a more moderate justice.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys,
We did it.
we're all done.
Okay, so quiz.
Quiz Monday.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, guys. See ya.
Gobble, gobble.